Hey everyone, I'm Alex, and I've got a story for you about boundaries. Physical boundaries, legal boundaries, and the boundaries a neighbor will completely barrel over when she decides your private pool is somehow her God-given right. It all started on a perfectly normal Thursday afternoon. I was standing at my kitchen window, a grilled cheese sandwich halfway to my mouth, when a pair of bright pink flip-flops sailed past, landing on my porch like a declaration of war. That was immediately followed by a shriek, "Cannonball!" and 3 screaming kids flying into my pool while I just stood there stunned. I didn't even know the woman's name yet. The only things I knew were that she had used a garden rake like a Jimmy bar to unlatch my side gate, then marched her kids into my backyard like it was a free water park. And then, God help me, she laid out a towel across my personal patio chair and pulled a bottle of tanning oil from her oversized beach tote. My golden retriever barked once. I froze, and in that slow-motion moment of suburban horror, I realized I was no longer a homeowner. I was a hostage in my own backyard. I flew outside so fast I forgot I was still holding the sandwich. "Ma'am, what exactly are you doing in my yard?" I asked, trying desperately to stay calm as one of her kids splashed pool water directly onto my grill. She didn't even flinch. She just turned her head slightly and said, "Oh, hey, you're home." The kids just needed a little cool-off time. The community pool was disgusting. I blinked. "This isn't a community pool." She nodded as if I had just confirmed her entire life plan. "Right, that's why we're here." She patted the lounge chair and pulled on her massive sunglasses. "So much more peaceful." I looked at the trail of wet footprints, empty juice boxes, and floating arm floaties and thought, peaceful for who? "I don't even know you," I said. "How did you get in?" "Side gate," she said casually. "It was almost locked. You really should check that." "You used a rake," I said, pointing to the gardening tool leaning against the fence like a crowbar. "This is trespassing. This is my private property." She actually laughed, I mean a full-on dismissive HA, and said, "Relax, I'm Brenda. We live 2 houses down. My HOA liaison, Roger, says shared amenities should be enjoyed fairly." I felt my blood pressure spike immediately. "This is not an amenity. It's my home, my pool. You are not allowed to be here." She gave me a dismissive wave and turned back to oiling her legs. "You should be flattered. Your pool is the only one with decent tile work in the whole neighborhood. Everyone's jealous." Just then, one of her kids slipped, screamed, and landed hard on the concrete edge. I jumped to help, but Brenda beat me to it, scooping the child up and immediately snapping at me like I was the villain. "Your deck is dangerously slippery, Alex. Someone could have died." "Someone shouldn't have been here in the first place," I said, my jaw tight. She glared at me like I'd just punted a stray kitten. "You'll be hearing from the HOA about this." "Good," I said, "because they're going to hear from me first." I walked back into the house, locked the patio door behind me, and grabbed my phone. 5 minutes later, I had Mr. Henderson from the HOA on the line, sounding like he'd rather be auditing his own taxes. "Well, she does have kids, and technically we encourage neighborly sharing of resources." "Roger," I cut him off, "I am not part of your HOA. My parcel predates it. You know that." "We've had this argument." He paused. "Right. That. Well, still, maybe just let her finish swimming today and we'll clear it up at the next meeting." I hung up. Useless. If I wanted peace, I was going to have to take it myself. I sat in the living room with the lights off, basically preparing for a home invasion. At sunset, she finally packed up her things, leaving a dripping trail of footprints up the side yard, and didn't bother closing the gate behind her. I walked out, locked it with a heavy-duty padlock, installed a motion sensor above it, and posted a large laminated sign, "Private property. Trespassers will be reported to police." And then I sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea waiting for a storm. It came the next afternoon. This time the kids came alone. I caught them trying to hop the fence with a stepping stool they'd dragged from Brenda's porch. One of them actually yelled, "Mom says we're allowed." I called over calmly, "Tell your mom to come say that to my face." They scattered. 15 minutes later, Brenda stormed up my driveway like she was leading a picket line. "So you locked the gate?" "Yes." "You threatened my children with surveillance?" "Yes." "You put up a sign that makes us sound like criminals?" "Only if you break in again." She stood there sputtering, trying to form a threat that didn't sound utterly absurd. "I'll have you fined." You're violating community unity standards. I'm not in your community, I said, standing up tall. I'm on my land, minding my business, until you decided to turn it into a free public splash park. You're selfish, she snapped. The whole neighborhood thinks so. Great, I replied. Let them all line up. I'll get a bigger lock. That night I installed a second security camera and replaced the gate hinge with a reinforced steel latch. It wasn't just about a pool anymore. It was about principle. My grandfather built this house with his bare hands, brick by brick, and dug that pool himself after saving for years. Every inch of it meant something deep to my family's history. And now this woman was treating it like a low-budget hotel lounge with free babysitting. I wasn't going to let her stomp all over that legacy. The next day I woke up to find pool toys scattered across the yard. She'd tossed them over the fence like she was marking her territory. I gathered them into a bin, dropped it on her doorstep, rang the bell, and walked away without saying a word. The cameras caught what came next. And what came next was a petty war. She called animal control on my dog, claiming it was aggressive. They came, met my sleepy golden retriever, and left apologizing. She left a fake HOA citation on my windshield saying, "Pool use must be shared per bylaw 8.3, written in what looked like a pink gel pen. So I posted it to the neighborhood Facebook group with the caption, "Anyone else getting forged HOA fines or just me?" The comments exploded. Apparently I wasn't her only target. That's when I decided to stop playing defense. If she wanted a battle over the pool, I'd give her a front row seat. Just not the kind she expected. I picked up my tools, cleared my weekend, and started sketching plans. She thought she could just waltz in and take what wasn't hers. But she had no idea what I was about to build. And when I was done, the gate wouldn't just be locked, it would be legendary. By sunrise the next morning, I had the post hole digger out and a row of concrete fence footers marked in chalk. My backyard was quiet, humid, and still dripping with the scent of chlorine and irritation. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brenda's smug face sprawled out in my patio chair, like she was on vacation at a resort she'd won in a custody battle. But this time it wasn't going to be about yelling or arguing. It was going to be about outbuilding, outsmarting, and outlasting her. I was done reacting. I was going to redesign the entire pool entrance like Fort Knox, wrapped in pure HOA-proof sarcasm. By noon, I had dug out a trench running the perimeter of my pool's fence line. I drove to the hardware store, picked up reinforced privacy panels, steel posts, concrete mix, and motion-detecting LED spotlights. I even bought a brass mailbox drop slot to install into the outer post, just so Brenda would have a place to deposit her next complaint without stepping onto my land. I wasn't just building a fence, I was building a message. While I worked under the sun, sweat stinging my eyes and sawdust coating my shirt, I noticed shadows moving across the sidewalk. Brenda and her mini-army had begun their casual walk-bys, which consisted of slow stroller pushes and exaggerated gawking. One of her kids even pointed and said, "Mommy, where's the pool now?" Loud enough for me to hear. Brenda responded with fake sympathy. "Looks like the nice man doesn't want to share anymore." I didn't respond. I just adjusted the angle on my new security camera and kept drilling. Every squeal of the power tool felt like another lock on my piece. That night, the cameras caught her again. This time she wasn't tossing toys or slipping in through the gate. She was pacing, circling the new posts with a flashlight in hand, like she was trying to find a weak spot in the blueprints. She circled the yard for 12 full minutes, then stood directly in front of the camera and held up her phone, recording my fence like it was evidence in a crime documentary. The next morning, I woke up to a note slipped under my garage door. "If you want to play games," it read, "you'd better be ready to lose them." Signed, The Community. That's when I realized Brenda had taken this beyond her backyard. She was rallying people. She wasn't just trespassing anymore, she was campaigning. I spent the rest of the morning calling the county assessor's office and confirming again that my parcel was outside the HOA boundary. I printed the documents, highlighted the lines in red, laminated them and posted them right next to my new gate in case Brenda or her so-called community had short-term memory loss. Under that I added a metal plate. "This property is not subject to HOA governance. Trespassers will be prosecuted." I was tempted to add a drawing of Brenda's face, but decided to keep it classy. By that afternoon, Roger from the HOA waddled back into my life. He stood awkwardly at the edge of my driveway, holding a clipboard and looking like he was trying to remember if this counted as part of his jurisdiction or not. "She's making a scene again," he mumbled. "Claims your new fence is aggressive. Says it creates an atmosphere of hostility." I gestured toward the laminated parcel map. "Roger, if she doesn't like the atmosphere, she can stay on her side of the air." He nodded nervously. We don't want this to become a public issue." I leaned in. "It already is because she made it one. And if she comes over that fence again, the only thing going public is the footage, on every local Facebook group I can find." That evening, just before dinner, I got a knock at the door. It was a teenager I barely recognized, holding a phone and looking sheepish. "Aunt Brenda says you have to take the fence down by Friday or she's calling the city." I stared at him for a second. "Let her call. Maybe the city can explain to her how boundaries work." He hesitated. "She also said she's thinking about getting a lawyer." I smiled. "Good. I'll have my popcorn ready for Discovery Day." But Brenda wasn't bluffing. A few days later, things got quiet. Too quiet. And that's when I got suspicious. Brenda wasn't the type to retreat. If anything, she saw silence as tactical. Sure enough, that Thursday morning I noticed someone had spray-painted the back of my new privacy fence with the words "Pool Prison" in giant red letters. I reviewed the camera footage. It was night vision blurry, but it was definitely her car parked down the alley and definitely her older kid holding the spray can. While Brenda stood lookout, they even took a selfie next to it before driving off. I smiled. That was criminal mischief, vandalism. And this time the footage was clear enough. I called the sheriff again and handed it all over. The next day, Brenda showed up at my door, not with anger, but with what I can only describe as forced charm. She had a tray of muffins, a tight smile, and the air of someone rehearsing for a community theater audition. "Thought maybe we got off on the wrong foot," she said. "Things got a little passionate, but I think we can still be neighborly." I stared at her for a long moment. "Did you bring muffins to apologize, or to distract me while you sneak your kids back into my yard?" Her smile twitched. "You know, humor doesn't solve everything." "Neither does vandalism," I replied, folding my arms. The sheriff saw the footage. "They'll be in touch." Her face dropped just a fraction, like a mask slipping. She recovered quickly. "That footage doesn't show anything conclusive. My car could have just been parked." I stepped closer. "Let me give you some neighborly advice, Brenda. Stop before you dig this hole any deeper. You're not just losing the argument, you're losing the whole neighborhood." For a moment she stood frozen, the muffin tray trembling just slightly. Then she thrust it forward. "Take the muffins or I'll report you for harassment." "Report me for rejecting baked goods?" I asked. "That's a new one." She dropped the tray on the porch with a loud clatter and turned to leave. "Enjoy your lonely pool, you bitter man," she snapped. "I will," I said, "from the porch with peace and without your kids peeing in it." That was when I knew I had to escalate. Not with more conflict, but with something she couldn't counter. A neighborhood-wide event. A pool party. Invitation only, with someone important in attendance, someone who'd shut down any more nonsense for good. I made some calls. My cousin Dean, a retired police chief, now worked part-time with the county commissioner's office. I told him everything. He laughed for a full minute, then said, "I'll bring the burgers. Let's make it official." We scheduled it for the following Saturday. I sent formal invitations to every neighbor except one. Brenda, of course, found out anyway. She approached me the morning before the event, with a venomous look in her eyes. "So you're having a party now?" "That's right," I said. "Grand reopening. New fence, clean water, legal permits, full guest list," she hissed through her teeth. "Not including the people who actually live here." "Oh, you live here?" "All right. But this pool doesn't belong to the HOA, and the guests will include a sheriff, 2 realtors, and someone from zoning enforcement. Hope you swing by. Just don't bring muffins." The morning of the pool party felt different. The air had that early summer crispness, and the sky was blue enough to look fake. By 10 a.m., cars lined both sides of the street. I had a sign posted on the gate that read, "Welcome. Invited guests only. Trespassers will be served. Lawsuits." It got more than a few laughs. I had a photo display set up near the patio with printed screenshots of Brenda's greatest hits. Her sneaking in with a rake. Her kids leaping over the gate. The graffiti on the fence. Even a paused frame of her holding that clipboard while leading a protest on my lawn. I didn't put captions. The images spoke louder than I ever could. My cousin Dean arrived wearing mirrored sunglasses, shaking hands and handing out smoked brisket sandwiches like he was running for office. He pulled me aside after a few minutes. "She shows up." "You want me to do the talking?" "I want you to do the smiling," I said. We let her walk into her own mess. "Cameras are on. She won't know what to do with herself." I didn't have to wait long. Around noon, Brenda showed up at the edge of the property in a sun hat big enough to host its own solar system. She had a man with her, probably a new lawyer or some HOA lackey dressed in business casual. She didn't step through the gate. She stood on the sidewalk, waiting for someone to come to her. No one did, so she cleared her throat. Excuse me. Is this an HOA-sponsored event?" Someone shouted from the patio. "Nope. Just decent people enjoying private property. You should try it sometime." A few people chuckled. Brenda didn't. Her jaw tightened. "I demand to speak to whoever's in charge here." Dean casually walked over to the edge of the fence, leaned against it and smiled. "Ma'am, this isn't a courthouse. You weren't invited. If you step 1 foot past this line, you'll be escorted off by the deputy sitting next to the lemonade stand." Sure enough, a uniformed sheriff's deputy sat under a canopy, sipping sweet tea. I walked up to the gate and nodded politely. "Afternoon? Would you like a flyer? Or are you just here to glare at the fence again?" Brenda ignored me and turned to the man beside her. "This is the one. He's been excluding the entire community, causing division and threatening my children with surveillance." I held up a laminated copy of the property map. "This line right here says otherwise. This is my land, my pool, and every camera is legal, posted and justified. Your client," I looked directly at her, "has violated trespassing laws on no fewer than 5 occasions and vandalized my property. But please go ahead. Tell the officer why you think you're the victim." The man looked visibly uncomfortable. He stepped back. "I think we need to review our options." Brenda's voice rose. "This isn't over. You can't just wall yourself off from the community. You're part of this neighborhood whether you like it or not." "Actually," I said, "I'm not part of your HOA, never was." "Which means I don't answer to your rules, your fake citations or your pop-up pool parties. And today, the neighborhood gets to decide for themselves who they want to live next to." Just then, one of the kids inside the party did a backflip off the diving board, and a cheer erupted from the guests. Brenda turned and stormed off. The man followed, muttering something about being misled. A few days later, things got quiet, too quiet. She had one more move to make, and it was a dangerous one. I got wind of it when Roger, the HOA president, showed up at my porch with a manila envelope. "Brenda's pushing for an emergency neighborhood meeting," he said, holding out the envelope awkwardly. "She's claiming that there's an old clause in the HOA charter about voluntary annexation. She thinks if enough of the neighborhood agrees, they can invite your property into the HOA without your permission." I finally took the envelope. Inside were petition forms titled "Unity Through Shared Resources." She had 13 signatures. I immediately called my lawyer, who prepared a beautifully brutal cease and desist letter shutting down any false claim to my land and warning of civil penalties. I printed 50 copies of my own flyer, a map of the neighborhood with my lot clearly outlined and labeled, "Legally Exempt." 3 days later, a woman with a camera showed up. She was a local reporter. I invited her to sit down, gave her iced tea, and then I showed her the footage. Every clip of Brenda's trespasses, the gate hopping, the protest signs, the vandalism. I handed her the county map, the legal letters, even a copy of the police report filed after the spray paint. The reporter looked through everything, nodded once and said, "I'm not sure what story Brenda thought she was giving me, but this isn't it." The blog post went up the next day. The headline read, "The pool isn't yours, Kerren," and never was. It went mildly viral, and for the first time since this whole saga began, Brenda went silent. I should have known it was too good to last. It happened on a Tuesday. I was halfway through cleaning out the shed when my phone buzzed with a security alert. "Motion detected, back gate." I checked the live feed and there she was. Brenda, dressed in all black, hood up like she was preparing for a night mission, crouched by the fence with something in her hand. I tapped to zoom in. Wire cutters. I watched in stunned silence as she clipped the zip ties off the camera mount, then moved to the next one, cutting the line feeding the solar charger and shoving it under a bush. That's when she pulled out her phone and waved it in front of the sensor, checking if it still responded. It didn't. She opened a backpack and pulled out a towel, a whistle, and 3 sets of goggles. She motioned toward the fence line, and seconds later, her kids appeared like mini ninjas, dragging inflatable arm floaties like they were wounded soldiers across a battlefield. It was the kind of moment that could send you into a rage, but I just calmly called the sheriff's office. I gave them the address, the situation, and mentioned the ongoing history of trespassing. "This time," I said, "you'll want to send someone with handcuffs." Then I walked onto the porch, grabbed my tea, and sat down. 10 minutes passed. I could hear faint splashing in the background, a child laughing. Brenda's voice, soft and smug, drifting through the hedge like she thought the world had finally let her win. And then the sheriff pulled up. 2 patrol cars, to be exact. They found Brenda reclined on a lounge chair, feet in the water, looking like she just conquered Rome. When she saw them, her smile froze. "Officers," she said, voice sugary. "Is there a problem?" "We need you to step out of the pool area, ma'am. This is community access. The cameras weren't working." "I assumed we have the footage," I said, stepping around the fence line with the tablet in hand. "Live feed, backup recording, and a clean shot of her cutting wires." The officer turned and showed her the footage on my tablet. The second she saw herself on screen, hood up, cutting wires, her face drained of color. They issued a citation for criminal trespass and malicious mischief. She wasn't handcuffed, but the warning was clear. One more incident and she would be. She left with her kids, who were too soaked and confused to even protest. As they walked past me, I gave a polite nod. "Hope the water was worth it," I said. 2 weeks later, the for sale sign went up. No open house, no goodbye, just a moving truck and a tired sigh from the mailman. I watched from the porch as she loaded the last box into the van. She didn't look back. And that silence finally was the victory. Now the pool sits calm, the water flat and clean. The cameras stay up. The fence still stands. And the porch is mine again. When people walk by, they wave. When they ask about the sign, I just smile and say, "It's a long story." Then I sit back, sip my tea, and enjoy every quiet, uninterrupted second. Because in this neighborhood, the gate may be locked, but the message is wide open. I won the fight not by shouting louder, but by planning better, knowing my rights and standing firm on the ground my grandfather built. What do you think? Did I go too far by building a fortress and calling the police on my neighbor? Or was it necessary to deal with someone who refused to respect any boundaries? Drop your thoughts, your own HOA horror stories, and your take on where the line is between sharing and stealing in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy a story about petty justice, served cold right on your own porch. Thanks for watching, everyone.